Hello everybody, welcome to lesson 7. We're going to be learning about slope and y-intercept interpretations. So let's look at this equation y equals 4x plus 3. And we're going to interpret the slope. That's the number 4. This means the increase in y for every 1 unit increase in x. And this makes sense if x increases by 1, y increases by 4. When x is 0, y is 3. That's the interpretation of the y-intercept, the number 3. Let's look at this in a real-life context. The equation above gives the height of a tree in inches in terms of its age, A. We have to interpret the slope. So that's the number 2. And that is the increase in y. But y isn't y here, it's h, the height. For every 1 unit, but it's not units anymore, it's age or years. So for every 1 year increase in x, but it's not x anymore, it's the tree's age. The y-intercept, that's number 4. And that's when x is 0, y is 3. So when the tree's age is 0, that's when x is 0, y is 3. Its height is 3. So what I did here is I had these two sentences. I just plugged in when I saw y, I plugged that in for height because that's y. When I had a unit, that's just a year, and x is the tree's age. So let's do that for the population of Aruba. The equation above gives the population of Aruba p of x years past 1945. What is the real-life meaning of the number 190,000 in this context? That is the increase in y, because it's the slope, is the increase in y, but y isn't y anymore, it's the population of Aruba. For every 1 unit increase in x. 1 unit increase in x, we could just say that it's for every year past 1945. The real life meaning of the number 400,000, well, that's the y-intercept, and that's when x is 0, y is 3. So 0 years past 1945. We could just say in 1945, y is 400,000. So we could say y, but it's not y anymore. That's the population of Aruba. Is 400,000. Let's look at some real life examples. The formula above can be used to approximate the height h in inches of an adult male based on the length L of his femur. What is the meaning of 1.88? Well, first we should identify if that's the slope or the y-intercept, and it's the slope. So that means it should go along the lines of this sentence here. The increase in y for every 1 unit increase in x. So it should be like the increase in height for every 1 unit increase or 1 inch increase in length. And that corresponds very nicely with D. Kathy is a repair technician for a phone company. Each week she receives a batch of phones that needs to be repaired. The number of phones that she is left to fix at the end of the day can be estimated with the equation P equals 108 minus 23D, where P is the number of phones left and D is the number of days she's worked this week. What is the meaning of the value 108 in this context? So it should go something along the lines of 0 years or 0 days past when she started working, or when she started working, she has 108 Y phones to fix. That corresponds very nicely with B. What does the C-intercept represent in this graph? So in this graph, we have the total cost is Y, and the time to rent the boat per hour is is the x, or the for h hours. So we want to find the c-intercept, which is pretty much the y-intercept. That's the initial cost of renting the boat, or when there's 0 hours that you have rented the boat, that's the cost. The average number of students per classroom at Central High School from 2000 to 2010 can be modeled by the equation y equals 0.56x plus 27.2, where x represents the number of years since 2000, and y represents the average number of students per classroom. We have to interpret 0.56. First of all, that's the slope. So it should be the increase in y for every 1 unit increase in x. So that should be something along the lines of the increase in the average number of students for every year past 2000. That corresponds nicely with C. In air, the speed of sound, c, in meters per second is a linear function of the air temperature T in degrees Celsius and is given by S of T equals 0.6 T plus 331.4. We need to interpret 331.4. That is the y-intercept. So we could say that is when x is 0, y is 331.4. In this case, x is the air temperature and y is the speed of sound. So 331.4 means the speed of sound when x is 0, when air temperature is 0. That corresponds very nicely with A. The function above models the height h in feet of an object above ground t seconds after being launched straight up in the air. What does the number 72 represent? So that's the y-intercept, or when x is 0, y is 72. So when x is 0, that means 0 seconds after being launched, or as it's being launched, which is the initial height. The initial height is 72. Salim wants to purchase tickets from a vendor to watch a tennis match. The vendor charges a one-time service fee for processing the purchase of the tickets. The equation T equals 15n plus 12 represents the total amount T in dollars Salim will pay for n tickets. What does 12 represent? Well, that's the y-intercept. So this is pretty much saying when x is 0, y is 12. Or when there's 0 tickets, the total cost is $12. Another way of saying that is just the service fee. If you're confused about the wording of the service fee, you could just realize that C represents the total amount, which is not the amount when n is 0. And that's the same thing for D. It's not the total amount. And A is the price of one ticket. Well, if you have one ticket, then n is 1, and the price of one ticket would be $27. So it's definitely not A. Function h divided by h of t equals at plus b, where a and b are constants, models the height in centimeters of a sunflower after t days of growth during a time period in which the growth is approximately linear. What does a represent? Well, first, a is the slope, so that should be the increase in x the increase in y for every 1 unit increase in x. Well, that would be the increase in height for every what's t? For every 1 day increase in, or every 1 day that is allowed to grow. So let's read each answer. The predicted number of centimeters the sunflower grows each day during this period. I think that works because it's saying the increase in growth, or the increase in y, for every 1 unit increase in x, for each day during the period. B, the predicted height of the sunflower at the beginning of the period. No, that would be the y-intercept, B. So that's not correct. The predicted height of the sunflower at the end of the period, that's not a slope interpretation at all. And the predicted total increase in height, that's not it. The correct interpretation should be each day is allowed to grow, not the total increase. That's why A is the answer. So the equation above gives the total cost Y in dollars that a company charges a customer to rent the truck for 1 day and drive a truck X miles. The total cost consists of a flat fee plus a charge per mile driven. When this is graphed, what does the Y-intercept mean? So this is pretty much saying when no miles have been driven, what is the total cost is 19.9, or the Y-intercept, which is 19.9. Immediately we could get rid of D and B because that is not at all anything to do with 19.9. We know that the Y-intercept here is 19.9, so it has to be in the answer. And we could get rid of C because it's not a charge per mile. That's 1.5, the slope. We have a Y-intercept, which is the flat fee. Okay, let's go on to the total protein and total fat for 8 sandwiches versus total fat. The scatter plot above shows the number of grams of both total protein and total fat for 8 sandwiches on a restaurant menu. The line of best fit for the data is also shown. According to the line of best fit, which of the following is close to the predicted increase in total fat in grams for every increase in 1 gram of total protein? Now, if we read this carefully, it's the predicted increase in Y for every 1 unit increase in X. That's just the slope. So how do we find slope? We do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I'm going to pick a couple points here. We have 40, 63. And we have 20, 33. Y2 minus y1 is 63 minus 33 over x2 minus x1. That would be 30 over 20, which is 1.5.